3 True Smart Bird Feeder with Camera Horror Stories. Hey everybody, I'm glad y'all stopped by. Bird watching has become one of the fastest growing hobbies in America. These days, you don't need binoculars. You don't need to sit quietly on a porch. You don't even have to be home. Smart bird feeders do everything for you. They identify birds, record video, send notifications to your phone. Some will even tell you exactly what species landed. Most people buy them because they love wildlife. To watch cardinals, blue jays, hummingbirds, or maybe laugh at a squirrel stealing birdseed. But cameras don't know what's supposed to be there. They simply record whatever appears in front of the lens. Tonight, I've gathered 3 terrifying encounters involving smart bird feeders with cameras. A mysterious man who appeared a little closer every single night. A bird feeder that somehow recorded the same property in the year 1901. And an unknown creature that hunted every bird that landed after dark. Whether these stories are true, I'll let y'all decide. Story 1. The Man at the Feeder. My wife bought me a smart bird feeder for Father's Day. I'd never asked for one, but after retiring, I'd gotten into bird watching. It turned out she'd made a pretty good choice. The feeder mounted to a metal shepherd's hook about 50 feet behind our house. It overlooked a small flower garden, a bird bath, and a line of oak trees separating our backyard from a wooded creek. The camera was surprisingly good. Crystal clear during the day. Excellent night vision, motion alerts, cloud storage. Within a couple of weeks, I'd already recorded dozens of different birds, cardinals, blue jays, woodpeckers, mockingbirds, even a barred owl one evening. Every morning, I'd pour myself a cup of coffee, open the app, and watch everything I'd missed overnight. Most of the alerts weren't even birds. Raccoons, possums, neighborhood cats, nothing unusual. Then, one Monday morning, a notification caught my attention. 2:17 a.m. motion detected. I tapped the video. The infrared camera showed the feeder, the bird bath, and the fence beyond it. At first, everything looked normal. Then, someone stepped into frame. A man. He wasn't anywhere near the feeder. He stood just outside my wooden privacy fence. Only his upper body was visible above the fence boards. Dark hoodie, baseball cap, hands tucked into the front pocket. He wasn't moving. He wasn't looking around. He wasn't even looking at the bird feeder. He was staring straight at my house. The clip lasted 32 seconds. He never took a single step, never shifted his weight, never turned his head. When the recording ended, he was still standing there. I replayed it twice. Maybe it was one of the neighbors. Maybe someone walking through the woods. Maybe someone waiting for another person. When my wife came into the kitchen, I handed her my phone. She watched the clip, then quietly asked, "Do you recognize him?" I shook my head. "No." She looked back at the screen. "He gives me a bad feeling." That afternoon, I walked the entire fence line. There wasn't any damage, no broken boards, no signs that anyone had climbed over. The ground was soft from rain the night before. I expected footprints. Instead, the mud was untouched. I eventually convinced myself. Maybe he'd been standing farther away than the camera made it look. Maybe the infrared compressed the distance. Maybe I was overthinking it. The following morning, my phone buzzed again. Same notification, same camera, same exact time. 2:17 a.m. I opened the recording. The man was back. Except this time, he wasn't standing outside the fence anymore. He was standing inside my backyard, maybe 15 feet from the bird feeder. Still, perfectly still. He hadn't gotten any closer to the house. He'd only crossed the fence. That somehow made it worse. I watched the clip again. The timestamp still read 2:17 a.m. The recording lasted 29 seconds. The man never moved, not once. At the end of the clip, he simply disappeared as the recording stopped. That afternoon, I installed a motion floodlight overlooking the backyard. If he came back, I wanted the entire yard lit up. I also moved the bird feeder a few feet to the left. Not because I thought it would help. I just wanted a different camera angle. That night, I barely slept. Every little noise outside woke me up. At 6 the next morning, I reached for my phone before I even got out of bed. Another notification. 2:17 a.m. My stomach sank. I opened the recording. The floodlight had worked perfectly. The backyard was bright enough to see every flower bed, every fence post, every tree. The man was still there, standing beside the bird feeder. The light didn't seem to bother him. He never flinched, never looked away from the house. My wife watched over my shoulder. This is giving me a really bad feeling. I nodded. I'm calling the police. 2 officers came out that afternoon. I showed them all 3 videos. The older officer replayed them several times. Then he looked at me. He gets closer every night. That's what worries me. They searched the property, walked the woods behind the creek, knocked on neighbors' doors. Nothing. Before leaving, the younger officer stopped beside the bird feeder. You know what I don't like. What? He pointed toward the shepherd's hook. This camera detects movement. Right. So why? Does he only appear after he's already standing there? I hadn't thought about that. Every clip started with him already in position. The camera never recorded him walking into frame. It never showed him climbing the fence or crossing the yard. He was simply there. The following morning, I didn't even want to open the app, but I had to. The notification was waiting. 2:17 a.m. I took a deep breath and pressed play. The bird feeder came into view. The man was back. Now, he was standing beside my back patio, no more than 8 feet from the sliding glass door. His face was clearer than ever before, still expressionless, still staring toward the house. Then, for the first time, he moved, very slowly. He raised one hand, not to wave, not to knock. He simply pointed toward the second-floor bedroom window. The clip ended. I immediately ran upstairs, pulled back the curtains. Nothing. The yard was empty. The police returned within minutes. This time, they brought a K9 unit. The dog tracked from the back patio, straight to where the man had been standing. Then it stopped. The handler frowned. That's strange. What? The scent just ends. No trail leading away, no trail leading toward the fence. It was as though whoever had been standing there simply ceased to exist. As the officers packed up, the older one walked back over to me. There is one thing. What? He held up my phone. I paused your last video. He zoomed in on the man's feet. They were bare. The ground around him was soaked from an overnight thunderstorm. The officer looked back at the muddy yard, then quietly said, There should have been footprints. There weren't, not one. The officer shook my hand and started to leave. The older officer then walked back over to me once again. He said, I've been doing this job for 28 years, and this one is one of those calls that doesn't add up. I'll write my report and submit it, but my recommendation is to either get a continuous recording camera or stay up and watch. As they left, I thought about my options and how the man was just there. My wife asked, What are we going to do? I said, I'm going to watch. Later that night, I set up my equipment, my ultra-bright LED flood flashlight, my cell phone to call the police, and a cup of coffee. At my age, I need a caffeine boost to stay awake. It was 2:16 a.m., and I was standing at my sliding glass door, ticking away the minute. Then, at 2:17, just like clockwork, my motion light went off. I looked around at all the places we had seen him, but I didn't see him. Then, I heard breathing behind me inside my home. My hair stood on end, and I turned around slowly. A shadowy silhouette was standing at the edge of the room's entryway, just staring at me. I spun around and shone my LED light, but there was nothing there. At that moment, my light came on, and a voice said, Is everything okay, honey? It was my wife. I said, I thought I saw him in this room. She said, I've been here and I didn't see anything. I watched the bird feeder camera, and all it showed was the light coming on and me looking out, with no one behind me. I didn't call the police that night because I no longer believed what I had seen. It has now been a little over a month, and the man has not returned. I'm glad it's over. The one thing that really sticks with me is the lack of evidence about how he came and left. There were no footprints, and there were no additional videos of him coming or going. I still have the videos saved, and the officers have returned on their own twice to check on me. Each time they come by, we watch the videos again, and they always say the same thing, that this one falls into the bizarre basket. The second time they mentioned it, I asked about the peculiar basket, and they explained that it was a case file bin used to store unexplained cases. I'm unsure how to feel about being placed in the bizarre basket. All I can do is move on and forget about this incident, as it seems to have settled in a basket. It's now in a dusty bin, located in room 234, at the back of the police office, in the bizarre section of the basket. Sometimes, the scariest thing a camera captures isn't what it shows, it's what it doesn't. Our next story begins with a bird feeder that somehow recorded the exact same property, 120 to 4 years earlier. The year, 1901. The amazing thing about smart bird feeders is they don't just identify birds. They timestamp every recording. They catalog every visitor. They save every clip to the cloud. Most people never think twice about those timestamps. Until one day, one of them is impossible. Story 2. The year 1901. My wife and I bought an old farmhouse just outside Springfield, Missouri. It sat on 5 acres surrounded by oak trees. The house itself had been updated over the years, but you could tell it had history. Thick pine floors, hand-cut beams, original stone chimney. Out back, about 80 feet from the kitchen window, was an old stone well. It hadn't been used in decades. The previous owner had sealed it with a heavy wooden lid and turned it into a flower planter. We thought it looked charming. When I installed my smart bird feeder, I mounted it to a cedar post overlooking the backyard. The old well happened to sit just behind it. The camera had the perfect view of both. Every morning before work, I'd check the overnight clips, mostly cardinals, blue jays, occasionally a squirrel, nothing unusual. Until one Saturday morning, I opened the app. Instead of bird videos, there was only one notification, historical recording available. I frowned. I'd never seen that before. I assumed the app had updated overnight. Maybe it had added some new AI feature. Curious, I tapped it. The video loaded. At first, I thought it had opened the wrong file. The backyard looked completely different. There wasn't any grass. No cedar post, no bird feeder. No flower beds, just open dirt. An old farmhouse. And the stone well? Exactly where ours still stood today. Except it wasn't covered the same. The timestamp in the corner caught my attention. April 18th, 1901. I actually laughed. That's a weird glitch. My wife walked into the kitchen. What are you watching? I turned the phone toward her. She looked confused. Where's our backyard? I have no idea. We watched together. A horse-drawn wagon rolled into view. 3 men climbed down. Their clothes looked exactly like something from an old history book. Suspenders, work boots, wide-brimmed hats. One man unlocked the well's smaller wooden cover. The other 2 climbed into the wagon bed. Together, they lifted something heavy. Long, wrapped tightly beneath an old canvas tarp. Whatever it was, it took all 3 of them to carry it. Without saying a word, they lowered it into the well. Very carefully, almost respectfully. When they finished, one of the men replaced the wooden cover. Another shoveled loose dirt around the base. The third looked around the property, as though making sure no one had seen them. Then, he slowly turned, not toward the farmhouse, not toward the wagon, toward the camera. He stared directly into the lens for nearly 10 seconds. My wife whispered, "That's impossible." I nodded. He can't see the camera. The bird feeder wouldn't be invented for more than a century. Indeed, the bird feeder wouldn't be invented for more than 100 years. There was no camera, no electricity, nothing mounted to the cedar post. Yet, somehow, that man was staring directly into it. The recording ended. I immediately played it again. Same timestamp, same wagon, same 3 men, same well, and the same long object disappearing beneath the canvas before it was lowered inside. I decided to see if anyone else had ever reported something like this. I searched the bird feeder manufacturer's support page. Nothing. I searched online forums. Nothing. Finally, I called customer support. After 20 minutes, a technician answered. I explained everything, the strange timestamp, the old farmhouse, the impossible recording. There was a long pause. Then he politely said, "Sir, it sounds like one of your archived videos may have become corrupted." I thought that too. But the property is mine. What do you mean? The well in the video is still standing in my backyard. Another pause. He asked if he could remotely download the clip. I agreed. About an hour later, he called back. His tone had completely changed. "Mr. Lawson, I've reviewed the file. And? The metadata says it was recorded." "This morning?" I laughed. "It also says 1901. Yes, that's impossible." "I know," he cleared his throat. "But there's something else." "What?" "The recording wasn't generated. It was captured." I sat there in silence. "What does that mean?" "Our system logs show the camera was actively recording for 4 minutes and 12 seconds. That's exactly how long the clip is." "Right. So, whatever your camera saw, it believes it recorded live." After we hung up, I walked into the backyard. The old stone well looked exactly as it always had. Weathered limestone, a heavy wooden cover, flower pot sitting on top. Nothing unusual. Until I noticed something. The flower pots had been moved, just enough to expose an old iron ring built into the wooden lid. I'd lived there for almost 3 years. I'd never seen that ring before. Curious, I lifted the flower pots aside, then grabbed the ring. The wooden cover was much heavier than I expected. It scraped across the stone, revealing a deep, narrow shaft disappearing into darkness. The air that came out was cold, much colder than the afternoon should have been. I shined my flashlight inside. The stone walls dropped almost 30 feet before disappearing into blackness. Then, something reflected the light. Far below, not water, metal. I zoomed in with my phone. It looked like a brass belt buckle, the exact same kind one of the men in the 1901 recording had been wearing. I stepped back. My hands were shaking. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the video. Just before bed, I opened the app one last time. There was a new notification. Visitor detected. The timestamp read April 19th, 1901. It was another video that recorded for about 4 minutes, so I called my wife so we could watch it together. The setup was the same. My old farmhouse, the well, and a wagon rolled in. The men got off the wagon and walked directly to the camera, closely inspecting it. They stepped back, and I see them talking. I could read their lips occasionally. "What is this? Who placed it here? It wasn't here the prior morning. It's God's eye, and he saw the deed we did, and he placed this to curse us. We must." Then they turned to the camera with what appeared to be intent. I could read their lips again. "We must bestow the biblical rod upon, as he who is evil wishes to make us bespoken for by the damned." And at that moment, they started lashing at the camera until it went grainy and then stopped recording. I was once again bewildered and at a loss for words. It was then that I noticed the camera was offline after that recording. It hadn't caught any more birds. My wife and I went out to reset it, but we were shocked to find our camera had been destroyed and beaten to pieces. Was this simply a coincidence? Or did the people from 1901 somehow destroy or damage the camera in a long-forgotten time? I often find myself thinking about this, but I have no way to explain it. I have never replaced my smart bird feeder. Instead, I now have a good old-fashioned wood bird feeder, probably the same kind that people had in 1901. Sometimes, the past doesn't stay buried. Sometimes, it keeps recording. Our final story begins when birds start disappearing from a backyard, one by one, until the bird feeder finally captures whatever's been hunting them. Most people think birds disappear because of hawks, owls, coyotes, neighborhood cats. Nature has always had predators, that's just part of life. But what happens when the birds stop coming altogether, and the only thing your camera records is whatever scared them away? Story 3. The Bird Eater. About 6 months after buying my smart bird feeder, something strange started happening. The feeder used to be busy from sunrise until sunset. Cardinals, finches, chickadees, blue jays. Some mornings, there'd be 3 or 4 birds waiting for another to leave. Then, almost overnight, the activity stopped. At first, I figured I'd bought a bad batch of seed, so I replaced it. Nothing. Then I cleaned the feeder. Still nothing. Days passed without a single visitor. Even the squirrels disappeared. That was the part that bothered me. Squirrels will eat almost anything, if they weren't coming around. Something had changed. A week later, my phone buzzed just after midnight. 12:38 a.m. motion detected. I smiled. Finally, probably a raccoon. I opened the app. The feeder sat alone beneath the glow of its infrared lights. A single mourning dove landed on the perch. It looked around nervously, almost like it knew something wasn't right. Instead of eating, it froze, completely still. Its head suddenly snapped toward the tree line. For nearly 10 seconds, it never moved. Then, without warning, every cricket in the background went silent. The dove exploded into flight. The camera shook slightly. Something rushed beneath it so fast. The night vision blurred into a gray streak. The recording ended. I replayed it over and over. Too fast. Whatever it was, the camera couldn't focus on it. The next night, another notification. A blue jay landed. It stayed less than 5 seconds. Then it looked toward the exact same patch of woods, its feathers puffed up. It let out one sharp alarm call and vanished. Again, the gray blur. Again, the video ended. This continued for almost 2 weeks. Different birds, same reaction. Every one of them looked toward the same spot in the woods. Every one of them fled, and every recording ended with that impossible blur. Finally, I decided to do something I'd never done before. I left the live feed running and waited. I turned off every light in the house, sat in the living room, and cast the bird feeder onto the television. The live feed filled the screen. Midnight came and went. Nothing. At 12:38 a.m., the feeder chimed. Motion detected. A single cardinal landed. It looked perfectly healthy. Bright red feathers, black mask around its beak. It pecked at the seed once, twice. Then it froze, just like every bird before it. Its head slowly turned toward the woods. The cardinal began making a warning call. Not for food, not for another bird. A danger call, one I'd never heard before. Then every bird in the area joined in. Blue jays, crows, even an owl somewhere in the distance. They all started screaming at once. Then, silence. Not quiet. Silence. No insects, no frogs, no wind. The cardinal never moved. It simply stared into the darkness. Something stepped out of the trees. At first, I thought it was a deer. Too tall. Then I thought, maybe a black bear. Too thin. The infrared camera struggled to focus. The image blurred, sharpened, blurred again. Whatever it was. It didn't walk. It seemed to sway, almost like it wasn't touching the ground. It stopped beneath the feeder. The cardinal didn't fly away. It couldn't. It looked paralyzed. The creature slowly raised its head. It didn't have glowing eyes. It didn't roar. It didn't snarl. Instead, it opened its mouth, and every bird call I'd heard over the past 2 weeks came pouring out. The sound of a blue jay, a cardinal, a mourning dove, a mockingbird, hundreds of bird calls all at once, as though it had learned them, collected them. The cardinal finally dropped from the perch, not because it had been grabbed. It simply fell. The creature lowered its head. The camera glitched for less than a second. When the picture returned, the cardinal was gone. The creature was gone. The feeder swung gently in the breeze. The next morning, I walked out to the feeder. There wasn't a single feather. No blood, no tracks, nothing. I checked the recording again, frame by frame. The creature never actually touched the bird. The cardinal disappeared before it ever reached it. That afternoon, I took the bird feeder down, cleaned it, packed it back into its original box. My wife asked, "You're really giving up bird watching?" I looked toward the woods. There aren't any birds left to watch. She frowned. "What do you mean?" I pointed outside. For the first time since we'd bought the house, the yard was empty. No robins, no finches, no crows circling overhead. Not even a squirrel for nearly 3 months. Not a single bird landed anywhere on our property. Eventually, nature returned. One bird at a time, then another. Within a few weeks, everything seemed normal again. Last month, my wife asked if we should hang the feeder back up. I told her no. She asked why. I opened the app one last time. The account had been inactive for months. There shouldn't have been any new recordings. There was one. No notification, no timestamp, just a 30-second clip. The feeder hung exactly where it used to. The woods were empty. Then, something slowly leaned into the frame. Not the creature, a face. Human, expressionless. It looked directly into the camera, then quietly whispered, "There aren't enough birds anymore." The video ended. I deleted the app that night. I never opened it again. On a shelf in my garage, there's a box with a captivating message. "Watch birds in 8K. Inside, it keep my smart bird feeder. I have no desire or interest in opening it again. I know that if I attract birds, I might attract something or someone or whatever that is. Since then, I found another hobby that happily fills my time. It doesn't have a built-in camera, it doesn't feed wildlife, and it certainly doesn't capture horror in 8K. If you enjoyed tonight's stories, let me know which one disturbed you the most. E-Man at the Feeder. The year 1901. E-Bird Eater. Have you ever captured something strange on a trail camera, security camera, doorbell camera, or smart bird feeder? I'd love to read your story in the comments. Who knows? Your experience might inspire a future episode of Stories That Scare. Keep the fires burning, and as always, I'll tell the stories. If you'll stay scared. Writing.